So if you move around our villages and towns throughout our country, you'll probably see someone selling individual cigarettes and probably selling quite a lot of them. That's despite the fact that selling singles is illegal in our country. Many of the cigarettes sold through the informal sector may be produced by illicit manufacturers. This happens because people want to get around the excise tax that is enforced on cigarettes. Well, in the budget last week, the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced that excise duties on electronic nicotine products, so vaping products mainly, will go up to just over R3 a milliliter. Dr. Sharon Nyatsanza is at the National Council Against Smoking. Dr. Nyatsanza, good afternoon to you, and thanks for your time. Do you welcome this increase? Do you welcome what the government has now put forward?
Well, thank you, Stephen, for making time for this important conversation. So the National Council Against Smoking does welcome the increase on taxes for the tobacco products, including heated tobacco, and, as you just mentioned, vaping as well. So we do welcome that because we still recognize that taxation is still the most effective policy to drive down tobacco use. So we definitely do welcome that increase, but we still are really worried about the nominal increases that we've been seeing in the recent years. So you will note that, for example, for the vaping, the increase for this year is actually just 14 cents. And if you think of it in terms of our economy, in terms of where we are right now, 14 cents increase won't really actually make an impact in terms of reducing affordability. And even if you look at the cigarettes, for example, the taxes has been increased by 98 cents for a pack of 20. And again, that actually does not result in reduced affordability. So we still are really, below the target in terms of taxation, because WHO actually is recommending that countries must ensure that their taxes are 75% of the retail price. And South Africa's are just around 50% of the retail price.
Okay, so I mean, you're suggesting then that there's quite a lot of scope, that in fact we should push the price of these things up quite significantly, by 25 percentage points.
There still really is much of a leeway from 50% to 75%. You can see that there really is a gap. There still really is leeway for the Minister of Finance to really make significant, changes to taxation. Obviously, it won't happen. We don't recommending for that to happen over 1 year. We've seen, for example, in the previous years, pre-2010, when we saw government actually increasing taxes by 10% per year to ensure that they actually did get to their target of 50%. But from 2010, their target has not changed. It still is at 50%. And that is partly why we believe that's why we keep seeing nominal increases in tax each and every year. And we really need to see a change. For example, if you had the Minister of Finance, he did say as a parent, he really recognizes the importance of taxes. As a parent, he recognizes, for example, the need to reduce ugly use, vapes among the youth. But in terms of the amount that was put on the table, it doesn't achieve that at all.
Okay, we've had excise duties, or let me put it another way, taxation at the point of reduction for cigarettes for decades. And we know, you say, the research shows that does reduce smoking, pushes the price up. Is there research that shows the same thing happens for electronic products, for vaping particularly? Do we know if it actually makes a difference to the amount that people use these products?
So definitely there is research. Obviously, the research is not as developed as the one we have for cigarettes, for example. But we have research, and we have the World Bank actually recommending that one of the key ways to reduce use among the youth, among children, among underage users really is trying to increase the amount in tax, for example, as well. So, for example, we see that the 14 cents increase was actually 4.7% increase. The same as the 4.7% increase actually, which was applied to tobacco products. So we do applaud that there was no differentiation, because the problem, for example, of underage youth is still the same, whether we're dealing with tobacco products or we're dealing with e-cigarettes.
Okay, but there's a balance that you've got to strike here. If you have a complete ban on the sale of legal cigarettes, the illicit economy grows. And we saw that during COVID. We saw the ban on tobacco products. We saw the huge increase in the amount of, the phrase that people use is the illicit tobacco manufacturing. And we saw what happened there. In a way, the same thing obviously happens if you double, quadruple the tax. If you put the tax too high, it becomes too expensive. It may stop some people from smoking, but it may make other people move to the illicit economy. So where is that correct balance then?
So, what happens, Stephen, is that if we have low taxes, or even if we don't even put tax at all, at the moment it will not reduce or tackle the problem of illicit trade. So that confusion is very understandable, but it really just is a confusion. If you look at pre-2010, as I mentioned before, the real tax increases were 10% per year. And in those years, actually, there was nominal illicit trade, very low levels of illicit trade, beyond 15% of illicit trade. And now if you look at post-2010, look at now 2018, coming to these ages that we are now, tax has been increased by around 2% in real terms every year. But in those years, actually, we've seen illicit trade growing rapidly. So what that actually shows, and what that actually confirms, as other studies have shown globally, is that reducing taxes or not taxing, or actually increasing taxes, does not actually cause illicit trade. As you already mentioned before, illicit trade is undeclared production. So someone is producing a tobacco product, and to evade tax, they actually feed into the illicit market. And what we know for South Africa, for example, is that the majority of that problem is undeclared local production. You mentioned, for example, COVID-19, a point where we saw high levels of illicit trade. But what actually happened in COVID-19 is that manufacturers were still allowed to manufacture and produce for export. But now we don't know, because we don't have a track and trace system, because we don't have a good enforcement and administrative capacity to know whether those products actually ever left for export, or whether those are the same products that were actually flooding the illicit market. So at this moment, reducing tax or not taxing is not going to solve the problem. What we need is just to secure the supply chain.
Okay, I mean, that might sound easy, and SARS, I think, has made some progress in that again. But the fact is that cigarettes are very easy to produce, and this is the problem. I mean, they're often called smuggled cigarettes, even though they're made here. They're very easy to produce. So, I mean, I know the new tobacco bill is going through Parliament. You obviously want that to happen. You want changes to be made. I'm just worried that if you crack the nut too hard, you might have a counterproductive result.
So definitely what we do need, though, is that, as you see, we have a tobacco control bill that is going through Parliament. So that really is critical to reduce, obviously, tobacco control use in the country. But at the same time, tobacco control is a two-pillar mechanism. It's a comprehensive approach. So yes, you need policies. For example, you need 100% smoke-free. You need picture warnings. At the same time, you need an effective tax system, which is accompanied by effective administrative and enforcement mechanism as well to go with that. So we basically need both. We can't delay one, wait for the other. We need simultaneous action. We need high taxes. We need SARS to ensure that there's strong enforcement, there's securing the supply chain so that people can be accountable and they can actually reduce illicit trade. We've seen this working in Kenya, for example, a country which is relatively comparable to South Africa. When they did implement, for example, a track and trace system, they actually were able to track the illicit products much, much more. And obviously we know that feeds into added revenue, which the country really needs at this moment. Because that does confirm that, taxes are supposed to be a win-win situation for health and also for the fiscus. But that only works if there is really efficient tax collection and administration.
Dr. Sharon Nyatsanza, thank you. The National Council Against Smoking, really do appreciate the time.